Hi, welcome to today's session about accelerating digital transformation with intelligent automation. My name is Kerry Kim, and I'm a product marketing manager here at OutSystems. Leveraging intelligent automation, especially in connection with digital transformation, is a topic that has been generating a lot of interest lately. That's why I'm especially pleased to be joined today by Dominic Cugini, who has been leading the implementation of more intelligent automation solutions at Keybank and has some practical advice that he can share with us. Welcome, Dominic. Why don't you first tell us a little bit more about yourself, Keybank, and some of your bank's major digital initiatives?
Thank you, Kerry. Glad to be here. I've been with the bank for over 16 years. I've been in several positions in both operations and technology. And my latest position is being the domain CIO for service digitization. Our goal is to bring a digital first mindset to Key. We want to change and streamline our processes to be better enabled by technology. And we'll talk a little bit more about hyper automation, which is driving that a little bit later in this conversation. We really want to change the client and employee experience as we go through this journey. That's going to support one of the key pillars, which is digitize. And you'll see that there are three others. Primacy, we want to be the primary account, whether you're a consumer or a corporate customer with us. Healthcare is a significant part of Key's business and a significant focus for us as we go forward. And then bankers, having the right talent in both our consumer and commercial businesses. Those are our four primary pillars at this time. As you can see, we like to think of ourselves as a 200-year-old bank that's born digital, really trying to change our mindset to think more digitally to keep up with the changing times.
Great. So primacy, digitalization, addressing both the healthcare and banking segments, these are some of your major or key strategic initiatives. Thank you very much for sharing that context. Just to follow up on that a little bit more, what are the major industry trends that you see informing these initiatives and priorities, and what technologies do you see as supporting your current business trends?
So we'll hit a few different trends. One is consumers. We all have the trend of want it now. I think Amazon, Google, Grubhub, everybody has showed us we can get things faster. So that is changing our consumer culture. We also have other dynamics that we have hitting us. Regulations. Regulations are getting more stringent, and a lot of that's driven by the bad actors in our markets. So areas like fraud, AML disputes are spiking off the charts in the last few quarters, driven by different economic situations, even the war in Ukraine. So cybersecurity is coming front and center now to help banks protect our assets, our shareholders, and our clients. So as we look at that, it's kind of conflicting. How do we move faster for our clients and make their onboarding with us easier, allowing them to use our services easier, but how do we do it in a very secured way? So that's an internal battle that is going on within FIs right now as we look to balance both security and speed as we go forward. And that's where hyper automation starts to play.
So hyper automation, can you tell us a little bit more about hyper automation and your hyper automation journey so far? Maybe first of all, why hyper automation? When did it start? And where are you today in terms of your hyper automation journey?
Yeah. So I'll look at, where did it start? Decades ago when we started thinking about streamlining processes. While our minds were there, the technology wasn't ready yet. So if we look at hyper automation and our hyper automation journey, we really look at four cornerstones of that: RPA, low code, intelligent doc processing or IDP, and AI. Technology has finally caught up with the ideation of streamlining our processes. So that hyper automation allows these tools, those four tools, to come together and work with core systems to truly streamline processes, start to reduce the human handoffs and some of the delays that we see in our processes today. So that's a little bit about what hyper automation is to us. The why is it allows us to move faster. We can reduce cycle times. We can create a better client experience. We can do that while reducing risk. There are certain things now that either were near real time or would have to take a day or two for an individual to review your credit scores, for example. making sure you submitted the right documentation. That can all now be built into that workflow, and we'll talk a little bit about that more with one of our examples here in a few minutes. But how do we get all that security, verification of documentation, starting to pull data in, whether it's pulling it from an aggregator or pulling it from the documentation that was submitted in real time, so we can get to yes sooner and get the client the product they need. If we look at a little bit about our journey, because obviously we didn't do this all at once.
Right.
Our journey's been roughly 3 years. We started heavily 3 years ago and centralized our RPA team. We had 2 years prior where we had RPA and it wasn't really working. Part of that was understanding how RPA could be deployed, how RPA could really change keys. So 3 years ago, we looked at that. We set up a centralized team to really figure out how RPA worked in the ecosystem and where it could help. A lot of things started in the back office, but I can tell you within that first 18 months, we ended up spanning from back office all the way to front office, because we realized the back office is where things end, but it's not streamlining, right? It's not getting that hyper automation goal. So we started working RPA through that. As we saw that, we realized that there were gaps. That's what started bringing us a little bit more into our present and into our future. So while we've had an impressive 3 years, we have over 3,600 tasks. That's roughly 400 to 450 FTE worth of work done on a weekly basis. Our job wasn't done there. There were still gaps in the processes, right? Mm-hmm. So if we looked at that, where does low code come in? Where does IDP come in? Where does AI come in? And I'll give a little bit of an example there. If you start to look at an originations process, you can build that process end to end. There might be APIs within that process. There might be tasks that a bot needs to do. There's documentation that we need data from, so our IDP comes in. And then there might be decisioning. How do you start using AI and modeling to get to that decisioning, to get, again, getting to yes faster? So we've started building that journey. In the last year, we've brought on both IDP and low-code solutions, OutSystems being our enterprise platform of choice. So that allows us to start changing how we solution some of the things we do. Back a few years ago, people would talk about attended bots and attended bots trying to interface with human in the loop. Low-code is the next evolution of that. It can build out that full workflow. So whether you're connecting to a client streamlining coming in, whether you're connecting to 5 systems as an operations individual, we now can do that with low code and capture all the data and understand the process. Once you understand that process, then you have the intelligence you need to start leveraging in RPA, start leveraging in AI and some of the modeling on the background, and really advancing and getting into that intelligent automation.
That's really interesting, especially the dynamics of kind of that journey. Earlier, you talked about, you had an example. I'm hoping it's an OutSystems example. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're using OutSystems, the low-code platform, especially in areas where you're combining it with RPA and IDP? Do you have an example that comes to mind and results that you can share?
We do, and I can share a couple where we started and incubated. And just to let everybody know, we onboarded OutSystems in March of this year. So while we had some of these ideas building in the backlog building last year, it's really only been since March that we've been delivering, and we have 5 solutions in. And I'll just share a couple examples there. One, and our first one was fairly simple, time online. And while it sounds simple, when you have 3,000 plus managers that generally on a weekly basis have to make some sort of an adjustment, right? When you're talking, 20,000 employees, there's things that go wrong in that ecosystem. And our HR system didn't allow for us to do that in an easy manner. So it usually take anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes for somebody to go through multiple clicks to get that corrected. So it was a huge pain point, one that was a nice kind of jumping off point for us to start with low code. So we started with low code there. We built a system. It now took under 90 seconds for them to give us the information that we needed. Between low code and RPA, we were able to connect everything into the HR solution and update the timing correctly. So that saved thousands of hours annually. It was a nice employee benefit from a manager standpoint. And it kind of allowed us to prove this system. If we go forward from that, one of the examples we have is what we call Key Quick. So it's our lines of credit example that we have up here on the screen. We want to create an omni-channel experience. So we started small, we wanted to go a little bit bigger, faster. So this is our true, when we think of first cloud native application that is omni-channel. So the channels were branch, contact center, mobile, and web. And the idea was to give the same experience across those channels to our clients. We started with lines of credit. We wanted to, again, start small, make sure we understood the ecosystem. We had to bring things like authentication in differently. We had cloud to cloud. We have OutSystems as an AWS. We have our data in Google, for example. So we had to work through those security hops and make sure that the timing and the experience worked out in real time, right? And we didn't have any delays due to that connectivity. It was also the opportunity, again, and can't emphasize this enough, for that omni-channel experience. Today, often we build vertically within FIs. What that does is if you go into a branch, you have one experience, you're on mobile, you have a different experience. Well, for the back office, you're usually getting a different experience. When you're trying to troubleshoot from the contact center, now you have to train for both experiences. It makes it more difficult to answer questions. So it's a poor client experience. It can be a poor employee experience. So we wanted that exact same experience. We wanted to build it once and reuse it. OutSystems allowed us to do that on the platform. It allowed us to present it mobilely. It allowed us to present it on the web. It allowed us to interface with our system within branch. So to our branch employees, they don't know that they're leaving their system, but they're asking the questions and they're filling out the forms in the same way they do with a client if the client was on mobile. The nice thing is as well, because clients sometimes have questions. If they start on mobile and want to go into a branch and call the contact center, we gave the employees the ability to see exactly where that application stands, what's been answered and what's left, and they can start from that point going forward. Lots of times within FIs, sometimes you have to start over, or they don't have access to that online application in a smooth way. So it creates a poor employee and client experience. So again, focusing on our true north of making both those experiences better, this allowed us to do that. So we're excited. We built this application in under 6 months. That was with the learning curve. So when you think about speed, one of our faster applications delivered. The nice thing about it too is going into hyper automation, we've set ourselves up for release 2 that will be coming up later this year, of bringing RPA and IDP in. And what is that going to do? Now that we have the documentation coming in, we can make sure that when a client puts in their W-2, their payroll stub, that in real time we can verify that that is actually the right document. They scanned it in correctly. It's of good quality. We can start lifting that data off. We can start, what does that do? That brings forward the cycle time. We can start getting to credit pulls faster. Right. RPA, we'll start looking at RPA and AI for decisioning. If there's an unsecured line, can we get them to yes while they're in that session? Or can we text them within a few hours later that yes, they wanted a $10,000 line of credit or a $100,000 line of credit, it's approved. Or they want a $100,000 line of credit, we can't do that, but we could do 80. How do we do that in near real time, whether it's in the session or within hours versus days? That's really our goal. And we're excited to say that not only from a process standpoint of how this was delivered, our internal employees going through the process were ecstatic because they could see the iterative, true agile view of what OutSystems looked like as this was going forward. But now that we have it in the branch, they love the UI UX experience. They've started hitting with clients. We have good client and good employee feedback now for the first 2 months that this is in production. And we've gained a 15% recycle time reduction. And we think that can expand into the 25-30% as we add some of these other facets on in the next phase. So super exciting for us and kind of setting the stage for what I always call the art of the possible is the key.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that example and some of your preliminary results. If you were to take this example and consider the other automation projects that you've implemented, are there any insights that you've been able to gather or lessons that you've learned? What were your biggest surprises? What advice would you give to others who are also considering kind of implementing or embarking on this hyperautomation journey?
So I think there's a few things. It's understanding, one, that there are skeptics out there. When we first started this, it was always worried, well, if we start automating, are we going to have massive job loss? Are people going to want to work with our centralized team because of that? And the reality is what we've seen, and again, I mentioned earlier, we have 400 to 450 FTE in a given week that we're doing in an automated fashion. That doesn't mean we've eliminated all those positions. We've been able to pivot most of those positions to higher value tasks. So when you look at the changing regulatory environment, when you look at us trying to grow as a bank, deliver other services, it's allowed us to do that without the problem of hiring and training, right? We already had a good trained workforce that was dedicated to Key. We've been able to deploy them differently. So it's allowed us to be more future ready as a bank, which is really exciting. If you also look at this, understanding the regulatory impacts. So we've had a lot of conversations with our regulators on what automation means, how low code plays differently when we go at speed. How are we not, or how are we rather, making sure that our risk levels are the same? We're meeting the right regulations, because that's the fear, as I mentioned earlier. The faster you go, are you starting to strip some of that away? So now you're taking on more risk as a bank. So we have to continue to balance that. If you look at speed to market, that is one of the biggest game changers. But one of the things that you can't underestimate is the change management piece. Change management is critical. And what we learned here, especially with that Key Quick example of unsecured lines, right, change management was different from how does security look going from cloud to cloud. That was something we originally didn't think about, right? We just thought we're going to go build an applications. We've built hundreds of them over, right, the last few years. How do we go forward and do that? Well, there's some lessons learned around security. There's also lessons learned around authentication when you're going at speed. How are we making sure what's in the branch or on mobile that we're keeping our clients and our shareholders secure as we go forward? And then there's the change management of the people level. When you talk about speed's super exciting. Well, when you have somebody in the branch and say you have 3,000 tellers that need to be changed, or 1,200 to 1,500 branch managers, they can only take change on so often. Right. So you have to get in the right cadence. So sometimes we actually need to slow down technology a little bit to make sure we stay with the human cadence of how fast they can accept change. So we've really worked with our partners across Key and the enterprise to make sure that our change management is aligned with the people side. How can they assume change? What do they need to understand about this change that's happening, right? And when we talk about this is that applications, thousands of people, branch, contact center, right, all have to be prepared for a question tomorrow that they weren't prepared for today. So how do we do that? How do we get them confident? And how do we continue to improve that? So it could be anywhere from desktop, applications that they have to answer questions. But it really comes down to training and doing that throughout the build, not as a task at the very end, right? We brought them away for the entire journey. So that's one of the things I can never underestimate as a change management. It's something we're hyper focused on. And then there's the documentation. So as we go through this and we're moving at speed, you still have to do all the service lifecycle management, so the SDLC. So if you look at that, one of the things, and that's why we centralized a lot of this and keep it inside technology, because you still have to make sure things are tested with rigor. You have to make sure your data is being used accurately. Those are some of the things when I talk to some of my peers that start to get lost when things get too federated. So that's another thing that you have to think about as you're thinking about from a federated or centralized model. But those are the key lessons learned.
No, that's awesome. Thank you, Dominic. It's really interesting to me how even though we're focusing on automation and hyperautomation, some of the key lessons and takeaways are all about kind of change management, but also dealing with the people side of things. That was really helpful. Thank you. Dominic, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for sharing some of your insights and practical tips for others considering using intelligent automation or hyperautomation to accelerate their company's digital transformation initiatives. This concludes our session. Thank you very much for your time. For those of you listening, if you'd like some more information, please visit www.outsystems.com/intelligent-automation. Thank you very much.